Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to look at a 2011 action, sci-fi thriller movie called In Time. Spoilers ahead. In 2169, people are genetically engineered to stop aging at 25. The trouble is they only live one more year unless they can get more time. Once your time runs out, you die. The exception to this being is if the person is rich, then they can buy as much time as they want or need. Time has become the currency. Will Salas is a young man living in Dayton, a poor ghetto in the southwest USA. He lives day by day, making just enough to pass each day sharing time currency with his perpetually youthful mother, Rachel Salas. He wishes his mother a happy 25th birthday for the 2050th time. She tells Will she's going to be gone for 2 days to do some work so that she can pay off their loans and instructs him to meet her right after because she won't have long left to live. She gives Will 30 minutes for lunch and tells him that they will celebrate when she gets back. Everyone has a luminous green digital clock on their arms, counting down. Will is generous and easily gives 5 minutes to a young beggar girl, Maya. On the way to work he buys a coffee for him and his friend Borel. The price has just gone up. Walking to work they see a dead body in the streets. This doesn't appear to be too out of the ordinary though. Will works in a metal stamping plant, making shiny cassettes. After his shift he notices he is paid less, quotas have gone up. After work, Will meets his friend Borel at a bar. There they see a man treating everyone to drinks and drawing attention to his arm, which lists him as having over 116 years. Will knows that the man did not belong to the ghetto and was likely to draw attention to himself. Sure enough, the Minutemen, a criminal gang, shows up, armed and ready to forcibly take the man's time. The gang leader, Fortis, is actually age 75. All the people in the club disperse. Borel grabs Will and tells him they need to leave the premises. Will follows him at first, but then decides to stay behind out of curiosity. Borel reluctantly leaves his friend behind. Fortis offers the man to fight for his time. The man says that he needs a moment and goes to throw up, but Will interferes and helps the man escape. The two flee from the Minutemen and eventually find an old building to hide in. The man introduces himself as Henry Hamilton and tells Will of the time as currency system. It had been established as a means of population control after the advances made in anti-aging processes, but his people were still surviving. Inflation and lower wages were designed to keep the population in control. This currency system also meant that the rich could live much longer than normal and essentially become immortal, while the poor died. Henry, however, is tired of living for so long, and indignant Will tells him that the rich basically did not deserve their time. Henry offers Will some time when he observes Will has only 18 hours on his clock, but Will tells Henry he doesn't want his time. Unwilling to abandon the depressed man, Will offers to stay with him till morning. At dawn, Henry passes his time to a sleeping Will. Will wakes alone, with the 116 years of time and a message telling him not to waste it. Through a window, Will sees Henry seated on the edge of the bridge and realizes the man plans to commit suicide. He runs out to stop him, but just misses him as Henry's time runs out and he falls into the stormwater channel. Will sees street cameras recording him and leaves the scene. Will meets Borel with his family, and shows him his new time. To thank Borel for being his friend for so long, Will gives him a decade. Borel warns him that staying in Dayton with that much time was going to get him killed. Will tells Borel that he is planning to go to New Greenwich, where it is normal to live with a time like his. Rachel pays off a 2-day loan at a Wise ATM machine. She tries to board a bus to get home but the fare has gone up to 2 hours and she has only 90 minutes left. In a panic she has to run. Will is waiting at the bus stop, realizes something is wrong and runs toward Rachel. They meet somewhere in between. They run as fast as they can towards each other, but it isn't enough. His mother's clock runs out before he can grab her wrist to replenish the time. Later Will calls a private stretch Lincoln limo to pick him up and take him to a richer time zone. He passes through 4 toll booths with progressive fares into a gleaming modern but sparsely populated city center, New Greenwich. Will runs at first, until he seems to realize that he probably doesn't have to. He catches the attention of Sylvia Weiss and they share a momentary glance. He has cleaned himself up to dine at a nice restaurant. Will's meal is worth 8.5 weeks. He gives the waitress a week as a tip. The waitress says Will must not be from the area because he does everything too fast. Meanwhile, Sylvia is watching him from her seat at the restaurant. Meanwhile, Henry's body is discovered by the timekeepers, a body of authority much like the police. Raymond Leon notices the street cameras and examines the footage. When he expresses surprise at seeing Will's photo, his colleagues ask him if he knew the suspect and whether or not he had a criminal record. Raymond corrects them, telling them he did not know the current Will Salas but he did know the senior Will Salas. Timekeepers are then mobilized to locate Will Salas. Will enters a high-end casino and goes to the poker game area. One of the men introduces himself to Will as Philippe Weiss and pressures him into betting 50 years, which Will does so reluctantly. Sylvia enters the room and seats next to Philippe. Will goes all in when the poker game gets intense, leaving Will with roughly 27 seconds. Will ends up having the better hand and was able to raise his time to 13 figures, his time now reading 1,100 years. Philippe is impressed, as is Sylvia, his beautiful but sheltered daughter, the girl from the restaurant. Will gets invited to a party by Sylvia, which he accepts. Knowing to be prepared, Will purchases a Jaguar E-Type for 59 years plus tax and drives to the Weiss mansion on the coast. There Philippe introduces him to Sylvia, as well as his wife Michelle and mother-in-law, all three of whom look the same age. The women are followed by guards all the time, but Will convinces Sylvia to let loose and have fun. Feeling oppressed by her father and his men, Sylvia agrees and the two go skinny dipping in the ocean. Sylvia admits wishing that she could often do something wild and crazy. Philippe had always restricted his family members though, and sure enough he soon comes looking for her. Sylvia and Will manage to dress and make themselves presentable again. Raymond and the timekeepers show up and crash the party. They take Will into a room and begin interrogating him about the amount of time he received. Will admits that he received part of it from gambling and a portion of it from a man who committed suicide. The timekeepers take all but 2 hours of Will's time away as they don't believe Will's story. Raymond hints he knew Will's father and leaves. Will fights off the other timekeepers and takes Sylvia hostage, escaping out the mansion. Raymond commits himself to chasing them, even taking personal risks that other timekeepers avoided. After a car chase, Will manages to throw Raymond off their trail and escapes back to the country with Sylvia, who pleads to be let go. Will momentarily pulls off to a secluded part of road and asks for a time loan from Sylvia, who refuses. As soon as they return to Dayton, the car is wrecked in a trap set by the Minutemen. While Will and Sylvia remain unconscious, the Minutemen discover that Will only has a little time left and was thus worth nothing. Sylvia however had about a decade and so they take hers instead. The men are forced to run when they hear sirens before they could take all her time. Sylvia panics because she has never been reduced to having so little time. Will tells her that she should not be worried, as regular people live day by day. Instead, he brings her to find Borel, hoping that he could give them some time. To his grief, he learns that Borel had drunk himself to death with 9 years left on his clock, leaving his wife and newborn alone. Will manages to buy them 2 more days by pawning off Sylvia's diamond earrings, but knows it isn't enough. He calls Philippe and demands a 1,000-year ransom for Sylvia's return, to be sent to the Time Welfare Office. Raymond listens to the call and warns Will not to follow his father's path. Will learns that his father's crime was not stealing time but something much more serious. Raymond deduces where Will was hiding and assures Weiss he would bring his daughter back safely. At Will's apartment he explains his father was an armed fighter with a trick to win time contests. He demonstrates that you let the other win at first, they get overconfident and distracted just as the last few seconds run down, then the arm can be flipped and the flow reversed. The next day the ransom is unpaid. Will says to Sylvia that it was likely because her father was prevented by the timekeepers, but Sylvia saw it as proof that her father didn't care about her. Nevertheless, Will decides to let her go and tells her to make a call to her family. Since they were in the ghetto after all, he also gives her a gun to protect herself. They kiss and just as they split so that Sylvia can make her call, Raymond appears and nearly shoots an unsuspecting Will. A panicked Sylvia shoots Raymond instead, and Will corners Raymond and attempts to take his time. Raymond however has very little, for it is timekeeper practice to carry only a little time to avoid being targets. Since Will was planning to take Raymond's car, he graciously transfers 4 hours of his own time to him before hijacking the black Challenger car and leaves him alone in the ghetto. Knowing that staying in Raymond's car will probably get them caught faster, Will steals a cabbie's car and also takes some time from the wealthy passenger in the car. They learn that they had both been placed on a wanted poster with a reward of 10 years to anyone who could bring about their arrest. Philippe studies a large map of the world with colored lights and numbers. He assures his business partners that his daughter would not crash the current economic system. An injured Raymond manages to escape the ghetto, verbally harassed the whole time, and meets with Philippe. Weiss attempts to bribe Raymond into rescuing his daughter, but Raymond tells him that due to Sylvia's actions, an arrest warrant will be placed for her as well. If Philippe interfered and tried to save his daughter, Raymond will see him arrested as well. Will train Sylvia how to use a handgun. Sylvia asks Will if he really intends to give all the time away that he manages to steal. Will says that he can't watch the people around him die. She offers to help him get time. Will and Sylvia drive an armored car through a Weiss bank window and scoop up many time cassettes. They invite the onlookers to grab what they can also. They gave most of the time they stole. One of the people they leave it for is Borel's wife, who finds it in a basket outside her home. The large status board shows the economic imbalance in the world. In a motel the two get closer, then sense something is up and just manage to escape Ray and his squad. Ray alone takes after them over rooftops in a running gun battle, refusing to let them go. They manage to bribe a bus driver and escape the timekeepers. At a seedy hotel they rent the whole building for privacy. Fortis is trying to hunt down who is handing out all this free time. He interrogates several weak civilians. He taps out the time of one before a civilian speaks up. Fortis allows the man to join him with the promise that he will receive part of the 10-year reward. Fortis arrives and explains it is not just the rich and the timekeepers oppressing the normal citizens, the Minutemen are being allowed to do so as long as they did not start preying on the rich as well. Fortis challenges Will to an arm fight to the death. As the two men lock arms together, Will's time runs down fast. Will uses his trick to reverse the flow, then manages to pull a gun from his boot, kills the henchman and taps out all of Fortis' time. Then he and Sylvia are on the run yet again. Will and Sylvia are now on a rooftop. Will is starting to lose hope because he is realizing that what they have done together still isn't enough to upset the balance to a significant enough tipping point. Sylvia asks him what it would take then, to get to that point, to which Will replies probably a million years. This inspires Sylvia to suggest that they turn themselves in. Sylvia returns home, pretending to turn herself in, distracting her father and his multiple guards, so that Will could sneak up on him. Under gunpoint, they take Weiss to his office and open a large vault where they find a single cassette with 1 million years. Philippe tries to say it is always in an individual's interest to live forever even at the cost of another's, but the two runaways are unconvinced. After locking Philippe in the office, the two again return to Dayton. Raymond is once again on Will and Sylvia's tail. He chases them all the way back to Will's home zone, where Will has successfully handed over the million-year capsule to one of his friends for distributing. The streets soon become chaotic as people realize that the time-lending station is now back open for business. Will and Sylvia take advantage of the distraction and make a run for it. Raymond pursues Will and Sylvia to a remote area running toward Livingstone, the next town over, just as they all begin to run out of time. Will sees that Ray is a Dayton homeboy, an honest cop just doing his job, but the timekeeper has forgot to get his per diem and dies in front of them as he times out. With only seconds to spare, Will notices the police car in the distance, runs and manages to transfer the timekeeper's per diem from the center console device to himself. He runs back to Sylvia and just manages to transfer some time, saving her life. The two of them only have enough for a day. The Daytons stop working and march towards New Greenwich. Watching the news, the timekeepers decide that their jobs are finished. With 100 years bounty on them, pulling up in front of a large institution, Will and Sylvia draw their guns to make their biggest heist. Thanks for watching and don't forget to subscribe and turn the notification bell on for more videos like this.